Shalom and welcome back. So in our last video, we took a look at the fall and we analyzed the results of the fall in our own lives. But the question remains, exactly what is original sin? What does that look like? So in this video, we're going to take a look at the thoughts of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and his conclusions about what it meant that Adam and Eve ate from the tree of good and evil. Bonhoeffer's argument begins at the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with the fall of man, and it ends in the New Testament with Jesus. Now, we know that when the first humans ate from that tree, everything changed. Their whole inner life moved from a place of safety and shalom to one of fear, shame, hiding, and blame. They moved from a place of perfect love to the knowledge of good and evil. When Adam and Eve chose to name good what God had forbidden, that choice unleashed such powerful forces within humankind that we're still battling them today. So Adam and Eve, mankind, had within themselves the ability to choose good and evil. Now, we're going to take a look at Dietrich Bonhoeffer's thoughts on original sin. He was a 20th century theologian and philosopher whose ethical principles were really forged out of his stance against Nazism. And this is what he says: bearing within himself the knowledge of good and evil, man has become judge over God and man, just as he is judge over himself. The tree had been in the middle of the garden, and Adam and Eve transgressed that middle. Bonhoeffer goes on to say, the middle has been entered, the limit has been transgressed. Now man stands in the middle. Now he lives out of his own resources and no longer from the middle. Now he lives out of himself. Now he creates his own life, his own creator. He goes on to say that knowledge, since the fall, now means the establishment of the relationship to oneself. It means the recognition in all things of oneself and of oneself in all things. That self has become the center, and self is now the measure of all things. So thus, for man who is in disunion with God, all things are in disunion. What is and what should be, life and law, knowledge and action, idea and reality, reason and instinct, duty and inclination, conviction and advantage, necessity and freedom, exertion and genius, universal and concrete, individual and collective, even truth and justice, beauty and love come into opposition with one another, just to do pleasure and displeasure, happiness and sorrow. One could prolong the list still further, and the course of human history adds to it constantly. And these disunions are varieties of disunion in the knowledge of good and evil. The point of decision of the specifically ethical experience is always conflict. But in conflict, the judge is invoked, and the judge is the knowledge of good and evil. He is man. So speaking about the consequences of this shift from God-centered to self-centered, Bonhoeffer writes, for man in the state of disunion, good consists in passing judgment, and the ultimate criterion is man himself. Knowing good and evil, man is essentially a judge. Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are. He goes on to say that judgment is the forbidden objectification of the other person, which destroys single-minded love. I'm not forbidden to have my own thoughts about the other person, to realize his shortcomings, but only to the extent that it offers to me an occasion for forgiveness and unconditional love, as Jesus proves to me. Now, Jesus had an awful lot to say about judgment. We're only going to look at a few of the passages right now, but later you're going to do a study of the passages in an exercise this week. But in Luke 6:37, Jesus says, "Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven." Commenting on this verse, Bonhoeffer says, "If I subject a person to human judgment, I bring God's judgment on my own head, for I then do not live any more on and out of the grace of Jesus Christ, but out of my knowledge of good and evil, which I hold on to." Now, this word for "do not judge" is a very interesting word. In the Greek, it's anakarina. It's really of two parts, ana, karino. The ana part is, as in a compound word as this is, as a prefix, it often means repetition, intensity, or reversal. So in this case, it means reversal. Do not judge. The karino part means to condemn, punish, avenge, conclude, condemn, damn, decree, determine, esteem, judge. Now this word, anakarina, is where we get our word critic, like movie critic. And the word critic means to separate between good and evil, just like a movie critic which separates the good and the bad movies. Now, the problem with this is that Scripture alone tells us that God is judge, not humankind. Bonhoeffer goes on to say, in attacking man as judge, Jesus is demanding the conversion of his entire being. Jesus demands that the knowledge of good and evil will be overcome. He demands unity with God. Judgment passed on another man always presupposes disunion with him. It is the obstacle to action. So the truth is, you really can't judge someone and love them at the same time. And I think often we, as the church today, we act as these morality police, somehow setting ourselves up as superior to others. But 1 Peter 4:8 tells us, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. And Jesus is in his high priestly prayer before he went to be with the Father. He prays that we would all be one, that we would have this unity. John 17:20-23. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you are in me and I am in you. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one, I in them and you in me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. Then the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. If God is love, and that's exactly what the Scripture says, God is love, then we need to adopt this love, this stance of love towards everyone, our friends, our family, our enemies, our frenemies, the people in the street, the people we don't know, the people we do. We need to love everyone. There is really no getting out of that. Peter Kreeft says this, love is God's essence. Nowhere does Scripture express God's essence in this way. Scripture says that God is just and merciful, but it does not say that God is justice itself or mercy itself. It does say that God is love, not that God is a lover. Love is God's very essence. Everything else is the manifestation of this essence to us, a relationship between this essence and us. This is the absolute. Everything else is relative to it. It makes me think of this painting by Andrei Rublev that we looked at in a previous video. Remember that mirror there on the table? That mirror, that invitation for us to be part of this Trinitarian dance, to be actually invited into the love that the Father has for the Son, and the Son, the Father, and the Spirit. It's impossible to love and judge at the same time. So, I'm sure some of you are thinking, but what about, are we just tolerant for everything? Do we just let everything go? And I would say no. Gregory Boyd said this: the judgment that Jesus prohibits is not about ascribing worth to others by helping them get free from things in their lives that suppress their worth. It's about trying to experience worth for oneself by detracting it from others. It is not about noticing the difference between good and evil, giving feedback out of love. It is about eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil to get life. Does that make sense? Now we are going to read a little more by Gregory Boyd. That's, I think, one of your next assignments. That we're going to take a deeper look at judgment and what this means. He is going to try to unpack Dietrich Bonhoeffer for us a little. So, until next time, shalom.